As the hotly anticipated debate between Vice President Kamala Harris and Donald Trump rapidly approaches, superstar Democratic Congresswoman and advisor to the Harris-Walz campaign, Jasmine Crockett, recently revealed a sneak peek about what we can expect from that debate, and it's glorious. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have a couple of clips to look at in this video. Jasmine Crockett is a freshman Democratic Congresswoman from Texas. She is a part of this freshman class of Democrats that, in my opinion, is radically reshaping the party and for the better, particularly with respect to energy and rhetoric and overall tenacity. It's Crockett, it's Dan Goldman, it's Jared Moskowitz, it's Maxwell Frost. So many remarkably talented freshman Democrats. Our bench is deep and it is strong. And Crockett herself has gone viral multiple times. She's a frequent subject of this channel because she is very good at making the case as a former prosecutor against the MAGA Republican Party. She's well known for her feud with Marjorie Taylor Greene, whom she outclasses by like 45,000 IQ points. And as a consequence, her national profile has elevated, and she is a high-ranking advisor and surrogate in the Harris-Walz campaign. And so they're discussing this upcoming presidential debate between the vice president and Donald Trump. And I don't know about you, but I like what I'm hearing.
But here's something else. This is from NBC's Yamiche Alcindor, who reports the vice president's debate plan is to keep calm and get under Trump's skin. And among the issues the VP might raise are Trump's failure to get Mexico to pay for the wall, his COVID response, his failure to come up with an Affordable Care Act alternative, his failure to pass a sweeping infrastructure bill, and the critical role that he played in killing a bipartisan border bill. So what's behind the Harris strategy on this?
Yeah, I think that she wants to appear as if she is the adult in the room, and she is. What we will see is this whining child who will sit there and won't give direct answers, and honestly will distract and be a bumbling fool. We've seen it on the trail when he starts talking about, wind, and he starts complaining about sharks. I mean, the guy is really weird and off his rocker. And so I think that she really wants to, number one, assure the American people that she has a grasp on the issues, as well as remind them of why we kicked him out in the first place, and remind them as to why we don't want to go back. Because right now it's been a glorification, but people aren't talking about those freezer trucks that had deceased bodies sitting in them because he botched COVID-19. We're not talking about the millions of people that died. We're not talking about the reason that small businesses had to shut down was because he failed to acknowledge that we even had a pandemic going on and that he was telling people to inject themselves with bleach. What they don't want to talk about is how they lost all these jobs, or the fact that we went $8 trillion into debt in one term under Trump, because it was never about the rest of us. It was always about him and his friends. And so I think that the contrast will be clear, that she can remain cool in all situations, but also she will get to the facts.
Yes. And I am loving what I'm hearing about this, because it's a mix of trolling Trump, right? Deliberately trying to needle him and throw him off balance, given that he is a thin-skinned, malignant narcissist who is more fragile, really, than any other politician we've ever heard of, but also to do so with facts, right? She's probably not going to insult his weight or, his hair or anything like that. She's probably going to insult decisions that he's made and his terrible record. I love that. It's a twofer. And the MSNBC article that the host was referencing was this one here. Keep calm and get under his skin. How Harris is preparing for her first Trump debate. The prep sessions have been sandwiched between campaign stops, official duties as vice president, and preparation for her first interview as the Democratic presidential nominee. Vice President Harris has been diligently preparing for the debate stage for months, first by gearing up to face the Republican vice presidential nominee, and now over the past several weeks to debate former President Trump, according to 4 sources familiar with the Democratic nominee's preparations. Let's see here. Among Harris's chief aims, the sources said, are to avoid being pulled into Trump's personal attacks by remaining calm and focusing on talking about how her presidency would help everyday people. And on that subject, note the joint interview that she and Governor Walz had on CNN. Dana Bash did ask about Donald Trump's repeated racial and racist attacks against her. And all she said was, same old tired playbook. Next question. She refused to be baited. And that answer was universally praised by people saying, she just refuses to engage on his terms and take the bait, even though morally she would have every damn reason to, given that his rhetoric is so incendiary, the questions are so incendiary, and they would be eminently disqualifying in any other circumstance. Instead, she rises above the fray. Harris also aims to showcase what her campaign has characterized as Trump's lies, failures, and broken promises during his time in office, and to distinguish the administration she intends to lead from that of President Biden while building on his legacy. As of Thursday night, however, there's still no agreement between the Trump and Harris camps on the rules for the September debate. Now, my understanding is, because this article is a couple of days old, that they have indeed come to a consensus in terms of the rules, even though the vice president is also very brilliantly needling Trump on muted microphones. Trump has apparently said, well, no, we know he said it because we saw the clip. He says he's indifferent on whether or not the microphones are muted when the other person is speaking, thus preventing heckling. Trump says, I'd almost prefer them to be on, but I don't care, whatever the rules are. Whereas the Trump campaign is reportedly insistent that the mics be muted because they're afraid that Trump will be Trump on microphone, and that will cost him points in terms of who wins the debate. A source told NBC News that while Harris's team is preparing to talk about a variety of topics, the campaign very much views the optics of the debate as critically important. To that end, the source said, Harris and her team are focusing on homing in on how to needle Trump to rattle him. In that sense, the source said, it's going to be less about substance and more about showcasing Harris as a woman who isn't scared and isn't going to cower and who is going to stand up to Trump and holding him accountable. Her campaign also hopes to, quote, remind people of what it was like during Donald Trump's years, the source said. The strategy includes Harris possibly bringing up issues like Trump failing to get Mexico to pay for the southern border wall, his response to the COVID pandemic, his failure to come up with an alternative health care plan after he tried to repeal the 2010 Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and his inability to pass the kind of sweeping infrastructure bill that Biden signed into law. Harris can also be expected to hammer Trump on the critical role he played in pushing Republicans to back out of the bipartisan border bill. Another source said that the Harris team plans to emphasize what it views as Trump's advanced age and lack of details on policy proposals. So this is great. This is phenomenal, because one of the things that Trump enjoys the perception of, and it is a persistent perception advantage for him, even though the substance isn't there, is people look back on his presidency with nostalgia. People have lost track of time. 2020 was a terrible year. Most people would agree with that. But I think people are failing to draw the connection that Donald Trump was president at the time. He was the chief executive responsible for managing the COVID pandemic and the ensuing economic fallout, and he botched the whole thing. But right or wrong, and I would say wrongly, the American people seem to not be blaming him for it. They either have forgotten that he was president, they grade him on a curve, but it's not factoring in. So it's important to remember the facts don't speak for themselves, and that the vice president, given that it's been 4 years, will have to relentlessly, persuasively remind the American people that Donald Trump is a grotesque failure. He is. The examples that were listed in that NBC article that were mentioned by the host Jasmine Crockett, I mean, they weren't the number of apples to apples comparisons that the vice president can use against Trump are extraordinary. She could say, hey, listen, while you are trying to use 13 deceased U.S. troops who died heroically for our nation, who were tragically murdered by an ISIS-K terrorist, you were the one who promised to get us out of Afghanistan. You had 4 years to deliver. You failed, and instead you inked a terrible deal with the Taliban, a terrorist organization. You cut out our Afghan allies. You released 5,000 Taliban fighters who would eagerly murder even more U.S. troops. You did that, Donald Trump, and you left President Biden and myself holding the bag to clean up your mess. That's really all modern political history is. Democrats cleaning up the mess left by reckless, incompetent Republicans, and then Republicans getting upset because the job hasn't been done perfectly. Perhaps if you all would stop making messes, Donald, we wouldn't be in this situation. She could also mention the fact that it was Donald Trump who said that he would cap insulin at $35. He had 4 years to do it. He failed. It was Donald Trump who campaigned on allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. He failed. But it was Donald Trump who campaigned on a sweeping infrastructure bill. There'd be infrastructure week. Failed. Biden got all these done. Biden-Harris got us out of Afghanistan. Biden-Harris capped insulin at $35. Biden-Harris, passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which enabled Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. Biden-Harris signed the bipartisan infrastructure bill into law. Multiple apples to apples to apples to apples comparisons. She could talk about how he added $8 trillion, as Jasmine Crockett mentioned, the single greatest contribution to the national debt in a 4-year term by far. It happened on Trump's watch. Trump promised that not only would he not add a single penny to the debt, he would wipe out all the debt he had inherited from President Obama all the way back to President Washington. Instead, he gave us the single greatest contribution to the debt. Even if you control for COVID, he has spent more. He added twice as much to the national debt as President Biden and Vice President Harris. So there's so many things on which she can hammer Trump relentlessly. And very often, Democrats, I think even with Trump, quite frankly, have been so reluctant to hit Trump on his various failures. As a matter of fact, we know reportedly the word he hates most in this world is loser. Of all the insults of all the words that Donald Trump hates the most, loser is the one. That's why President Biden, when he was the Democratic nominee, referred to Donald Trump as loser repeatedly. So these sort of attacks, they sting. And she doesn't have to go quite like this, but I just want to remind you, this is how thin-skinned Donald Trump is. I want to remind you of a joke that President Obama made about Donald Trump during the Democratic National Convention. It's a goodie. And then we'll get into Trump's reported reaction.
This weird obsession with crowd sizes.
So, of course, President Obama is indeed making a dick joke. He's making a joke suggesting that Donald Trump has small male genitalia, and that is why he is compensating for obsession over crowd sizes compared to the vice president, compared to President Biden, compared to President Obama himself. How did he react to that joke? Well, according to well-known Trump whisperer and well-known reporter who has close ties to the Trump camp, Maggie Haberman, Trump did not handle that particular insult very well.
How has that moment landed with the former president?
So both of the Obama speeches got under his skin. He is very reactive to both of them. We have seen that since 2011 when Trump spread the lie that President Obama was not was possibly born in Kenya and therefore illegitimate to be president. I think you're going to see more of this. What I was struck by, Wolf, in this convention is there was a pretty focused message about Trump, and we heard it over and over again from the.
There you go. He's not handling it very well. He's not handling it very well. He's taking it personally. This is good. This is why the vice president should continue to do what Jasmine Crockett and others advise her to. Yes, not take the bait, but lay out bait for him and make sure he takes it. I would love that. I'm hoping that that's precisely what she does during the debate. I would be stunned if anything else happens, anything but that. And it's good to see Jasmine Crockett out on campaign trail, making the rounds. She is a forceful, energetic, very persuasive surrogate of the Harris-Walz campaign. And I think the more people are inclined to listen to her, the better Democrats' prospects will be electorally. And in the meantime, you let me know what you think in the comments.